Overtime in Albany, the legislative session was supposed to end yesterday, but since so much work is left outstanding, lawmakers decided to extend the session. A number of important issues remain unresolved. That includes rent regulations for millions of New York City residents and whether to put a monitor into the East Ramapo School District in Rockland County. But the state Senate was able to find time to pass a bill making that guy, the wood frog, the official amphibian for the state of New York. Our long state nightmare is over. We have a state amphibian, everybody. My sources say that the tree frog is now calling for a recount. Seriously, though, it is crunch time in the state capitol. It's looking like lawmakers might be punting on any number of important issues. Senate Leader John Flanagan says he is sending his members home, but he will continue to negotiate with Assembly Speaker Carl Hastie as well as Governor Cuomo. Joining the panel now, you were never one of the three men in the room, although what changes might have been if you had been Richard Barr, former member of the Democratic State Assemblyman.
Do you have any other cheap shots you want to start with?
No. Well, we're spacing those out through the course of the show.
No, he could have been close to being one of those three.
He could have.
Let's move on to something interesting to the people.
Tell me about the strategy of Flanagan saying he's sending his members home.
No strategy. There's no agreement. This is not bickering. This isn't small stuff. These are people with real, serious, different points of view. Republicans in the Senate don't believe in rent regulation. Democrats in the Assembly do. Who knows what the governor thinks? This is the way every legislative body in the world functions.
But not by sending everybody home. There is a message. Well, he said he's releasing everybody to go home.
At this point, the negotiations are handled by leadership. Same way as it happens in the Congress, same way as it happens anywhere.
And the same way it has happened in New York traditionally, the three men in the room state.
That's always been the three men. What are you going to do? Have 211 people in a room?
But then why is the Assembly?
What's wrong with you?
Why is the Assembly staying in place, and why is the Senate sending everybody home?
Political reasons, because they're afraid of people like you, which they shouldn't be. And these meaningless criticisms of whether they're sitting in their chairs or the negotiations are going on when they're not sitting in their chairs. That being said, there is some real serious stuff that hasn't been resolved. And it's not just rent regulations, which are going to get extended. You're right about East Ramapo. The Democrats in the Assembly have not been willing to sign on to a bill, even though I believe most of the advocates for reform of East Ramapo are for the bill. There are innumerable smaller bills that haven't been done. You're going to get a lot of extenders. You're not going to get a lot of action.
Okay, and we're going to get back to some of those specifics in just a second. Just hang on there for a second. the Assembly just sitting in their chairs, it's more than just a message. Is it? Because at least that signals to me like they're willing to get some work done. They're willing to take some votes. They're ready to pass bills if they get them.
Let me say up front, I absolutely hate tonight to agree with this man. But
I hate it more than anybody.
Why don't you just come up with a number, 6, and put up a something that's a 6 when you agree with me?
But he's correct. I mean, he was one of the lawmakers. It does come down to, he may not agree with my use of words here, posturing to a degree. You want to send a message that we're here, we're doing the people's business. But the question I have is that they're almost at polar opposites. So as somebody that was in the room in terms of the legislature, I want to know your gut. How is this going to work out in terms of, let's say, rent control and then East Ramapo? What does your gut say, Mr. Brodsky?
Well, a lot of it depends on what the members think of the issues. The Senate Republicans have an ideological opposition to rent regulation.
To begin with.
That's complicated by the fact that very few of them are from the areas where there's rent regulation. The suburbs and New York City. This is a traditional garden variety but very important political fight. It's not clear to me how it's going to come out. My bet, an extender, a straight extender, maybe 6 months, maybe a year, maybe 2.
Is there any compromise other than just an extender? Is there any compromise? Is there any, we give a little on this side, we give a little on that side?
Well, that's not always a good thing. Sometimes there are principled positions. And the notion that the real problem here is they fail to compromise doesn't explain what's at stake here. Millions of people are affected by the rent laws. It may not be right to compromise. Better that you should precipitate a political crisis than start eating away at that, is one perspective. This is no different than an argument you'd have within a family about whether what school to send a kid to. People disagree.
Yeah, but the thing is, at some point, you got to figure out what school to send the kid to. You got to come to a conclusion.
That it's not happening by June 18th is not a huge sign of dysfunction. These disputes take time. It happens in every legislative body in the world.
So an extender, but then the million-dollar question, do you think at the end of the day, your hunch, there'll be a strengthening of the rent
No,
piggybacking?
I think there'll be a straight extender.
Wow. So then that means basically the Democrats lose.
No, that means that neither side wins and neither side loses, which is why that's what I think you're going to get. It is a compromise, but it also means that eventually criticism will come back on the governor because although people talk about this as being a fight between the Senate and the Assembly, the governor's positions on these things have to be understood and where he wants to put muscle on. You know, the problem for the governor is that when you make the case that you're the king and you're in charge and you can get it done, and then it doesn't get done, everyone says, well, you're the king. Why isn't it getting done? That's what's happening right now.
How much muscle does he have in this environment?
It's complicated. Part of the reason it's complicated is because the governor doesn't have to negotiate a budget. He can demand a budget. He has to negotiate the end of the session stuff. Maybe he's better off waiting for the next budget and ruling by executive fiat. I don't want to turn this into a seminar on the constitutional powers of the governor and the legislature in Albany. Let's just say that no one's covering themselves with political glory, but stuff is going to happen.
All right, I think we're going to leave it right there. We're going to take a break. When we come back, Republican candidates for president have a new problem on their hands. It's not Donald Trump or a field that's growing by the day. What if I told you that instead of this guy, it was Pope Francis? He's now complicating things for the GOP. We're going to explain.